I heard something I liked this week on the YouTubes. So before the show starts, I cooked up this quick homage for your convenience.
Hi, Aaron Raw. I don't think you and I have before now spoken, but let's solve that problem. For those of you who are keeping score, this is what it sounds like when you preach to the converted. Can I get a hallelujah? Can I get an amen? For those who are keeping track, the distinctions are semasiological and onomasiological. The semasiological one would be the general dictionary, whereas the onomasiological one will be a specialized dictionary. A semasiological dictionary is something like the Merriam-Webster's dictionary I pulled up. An onomasiological dictionary would be something like Tabor's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary, which, if you don't know how it's organized and how the words are constructed, is not going to be useful information for you. If you don't know how these dictionaries operate, you will not be able to make use of that because it is so specialized that only people who are expressly trained in it or who happen to have an interest in studying it will be able to even sensibly wrestle with the words in that onomasiological dictionary. Moreover, Aaron Raw, I know beyond all doubt that you are aware of the distinction because you, like so many other atheists, quite properly in this case, whine and complain about the equivocation that happens with respect to using terms as their theory as it's used in science, with a very specialized, particular onomasiological definition, versus the general use of the word theory that creationists want to use, the semasiological definition. You two are aware of the distinction between technical definitions and general definitions. And you quite properly point out the logically fallacious reasoning and argumentation on behalf of creationists with respect to their insisting on using a general term when what is actually relevant here is a technical term. My point, in response to you, is that's exactly what's happening here with this concept of feminist and feminism. You're trying to use this very general definition that is inapposite here, in as much as feminism has, for better or worse, become an actual academic, and I use that tongue-in-cheek slightly, field. It now has its own particular vocabulary, its own specialized uses of words, and you are either profoundly ignorant of this, or you are willfully misrepresenting the position to the audience who are themselves not in a position to understand what it is that you're doing to them. How you can be ignorant of these definitions beggars my imagination. Either you don't do your research, in which case you're inept, or you do your research, in which case you know this and you say otherwise, which makes you a lying douchebag who will tell whatever little lies he needs to tell to protect his ideology, kind of like lying for Jesus. You have a great day there, pumpkin. Integral math, just a car. Integral math, just a car. Integral math, just a car. Integral math. Integral math. Sorry, carry on.
This week on Apostasy Now, we've got Rene Chouinard. Now, he's a Canadian. He actually lives pretty close to where I'm at. And he actually went to Canada's Human Rights Tribunal to get Bible distributions removed from the local schools. This is a victory. And I think you're going to find not only is he a positive person, he's very informed and he's good at explaining how the system works. So even if you're not in Canada, you can still probably learn something from somebody who's been through the system and is still available to talk to anyone, has a website. I'll put all that in the notes. This interview's great. Smashlock and I really enjoyed talking to Rene, and I know you're going to enjoy listening to him. He speaks clearly, and I think that you'll be encouraged to pick your battles and stick to it because it's worth it.
Because I'm very much a skeptic. I'm more of a skeptic than I am an atheist. I mean, atheist is a conclusion based on my skepticism.
You'll have to come like a little child to the foot of the cross.
That attitude is what is responsible for the rise of atheism.
That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace.
What is the penalty for leaving the Muslim faith?
With the death penalty.
Thank you.
This is Apostasy Now.
For people to get the information correct before they start yapping.
Get ready to root for the bad guys.
Begins with E, evidence. All the evidence.
We've read a couple of times your story on our show. A lot of times we don't hear very I guess it was kind of a mixed result, but we don't normally hear anything positive when it comes to the front on these types of things. Too often it's a total loss. When we're talking about separation of church and state, right?
I don't think you've been listening well enough. I mean, we got Lord's Prayer to the schools 20 years ago. We got Gideon's out now. You know, I think society's moving in a steady direction. You tend to hear a lot more noise when we lose than when we win, but
That's true.
There's lots going on. There's a lot of good stuff going on. I mean, we're winning every day, I think.
A lot of people still really don't understand how the whole process works. So I was thinking maybe you could kind of just give us a walkthrough about when this started and what the steps were that you took, how you went through it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me use my case as an example, but I'll give you the sort of the broader version so that anyone else who has a beef can consider it. Of course, in our case, the school's doing a variety of things, and we're looking at doing some more action against them. But one of the things that we thought was pretty blatant and obvious was Gideon Bibles. They're handing out Gideon Bibles. Not actually handing out the Bibles, sending home notes saying Gideon Bibles are available to all the grade 5 kids in our school. It depended on the principal. So pretty blatant, pretty obvious. Either you're giving out religious material from all the religions because that's part of your mandate, or you shouldn't be doing any at all. So we approached the school. First off, you have to establish, are they discriminatory on their actions? So we went and we said, okay, well, there's a book on that's age appropriate on non-belief, and there's a variety of them out there. Richard Dawkins rather just came up with a fairly good one too, but we did one from Dan Barker, that was a little older.
Yeah.
And we said, hey, okay, so you're giving out religious material. This is our perspective. You're going to do that? No way. Okay, so they're discriminating, right?
Yeah.
That's established. So we actually talked to a lawyer, which was the step everybody else can skip, because we weren't really sure how to proceed. He sent a letter to the board saying, hey, you know what? You're out of line, so fix it. Or else there's going to be repercussions, basically. And, coming from a lawyer, usually he actually laughed about it and said, well, of course they will. They're blatantly in the wrong. Of course they're going to have to, because as soon as you get a lawyer saying, the game's up. And surprise, surprise, they didn't. But his recommendation to us was, and this is where everybody else could just skip to, you don't need a lawyer to go to Human Rights Tribunal. You need to, have a lot of self-esteem, because I sat in a room with 6 other constitutional lawyers to argue this case. But you can just file a complaint, and there's no cost to doing that. It's kind of a social justice thing. The tribunals have a bad reputation in a lot of sense because people think they're abused and what have you. But you know what? They're the only facility we have in Ontario to stand up and say, I'm a little guy, I don't have a lot of money, I can't really afford to do a legal challenge, but something's wrong and I want to speak out about it. So you file the complaint, you wait a very long time, you gather evidence in a factual way. I mean, that's the important thing. People get up and then they kind of think they're going to, just say, well, I'm not happy about it and I don't think it's right and somebody else should look into this. No, you have to do it. You have to come up and say, here's the case. Look at the legislation yourself. Look at the evidence they're able to bring forward. Demonstrate that what they did was wrong. In this case, we showed that they wouldn't distribute material from either us personally, or we finally actually got an Islamic group to offer to distribute stuff, and they didn't distribute that either.
Oh,
so
wow.
we established. Yeah. I think it may have been the same group that ended up doing something in Waterloo, because it was just before the Waterloo thing. And then in Waterloo, their school board said, well, we're going to let everybody distribute. So an Islamic group come up and said, well, okay, not to be bad guys about it. I mean, it was moderate Islamic groups. They're not anyone that was socially a problem. And the people of Waterloo just went nuts. Well, it's all fair, right? Until somebody else tries to take a turn. It's all, we're not doing anything wrong. Oh, you're going to do the same thing? No way. This is terrible. You can't do that to her. So that's kind of where it went. But, the process, like I say, a lot of people don't like the human rights tribunals because or any of the tribunal systems in Ontario, because anybody can bring a complaint, and then you have to kind of defend yourself, and there's no cost to it or whatever. And maybe there should be some kind of a fee or something, but for a small, per parent, or somebody working in a job that's not being treated properly, or any of this sort of stuff. I mean, what do? You're going to invest $100,000 in legal fees to get Bibles out of the school. You have no recourse to people that are blatantly, flagrantly, discriminating and avoiding the law. The tribunals give you that recourse.
If the Gideons are known for one thing, it's Bibles. This warehouse is full of them. And while many will be shipped off to hotel and motel rooms across the country, others are destined for public school classrooms. These small paperback New Testaments are part of a long-standing school distribution program, according to Executive Director Paul Mercer.
In 1946, it started in a little town outside of Regina, Saskatchewan. Now we're in 191 different countries, giving it to students in grade 5.
But Rene Chouinard says it's a choice no school or parent should have to make. When his 10-year-old daughter came home with the permission card, he took action.
People have been coming in the school board saying we're not comfortable with this for years, and the school board has not responded and clearly was not responding. So we went to a lawyer and we said, what's the route to go? He looked the case over and he said, well, you absolutely have a case here. Bring this to the Human Rights Tribunal. This is the appropriate place to go.
Chouinard, a humanist, claims the distribution program violates freedom of religion, including the right not to believe in anything.
The issue is that the school board is clearly siding with what they view one group over other groups, and in a multicultural environment, that's a problem. And certainly on any state where we want to have freedom of religion and freedom for all of the different groups, you need to also accompany that with separation of the government, the church and state.
School boards must now decide whether to accommodate all faiths or none at all.
How would you feel about Mormons distributing the Book of Mormon? How would you feel about Muslims distributing the Quran? How would you feel about your latest cult that you really don't like distributing their literature to impressionable young people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they present their case to the school board and the principal, and if they find there's value in what they're offering, fine.
For Chouinard, this is the wrong approach.
Well, they've opened a whole can of worms.
Well, I actually had a question for you. So this is just to kind of help clear up maybe a misconception of my own. When I was reading the article last time, I'm curious, was your intention to have all of the materials be allowed to be distributed equally? Or are you of the mindset that religion and religious material should be kept out of the schools altogether?
As you might suspect, I have a bit of a mixed perspective on that. First off, I think you have to look at age appropriateness. I don't think that grade 5, 10-year-old kids are the battleground for religious doctrines. I just don't think that's appropriate. Having had young kids myself, my whole thing was just leave my kids alone. If you want to talk to me about religion, come talk to me about religion. But, leave my kids alone. And when they get old enough, then you can have that discussion with them too. But for the time being, at this young age, and I would think anything, basically below puberty, or I don't talk to kids unless they're unless they're not kids anymore, to be frank, because they're going to wait till someone's like 17, 18 years old before I say anything to them. It's just not appropriate to go around, after young people that, causes disruption in the family, all that sort of stuff. So, at the age that they were doing it, there should be nothing at all. Absolutely. And we offered to distribute something only to show that, it's inappropriate, basically, and that the school board was not being fair and just in what they were doing. So it was to set the example that what they were doing, they were pretending that, oh no, we're just doing a nice thing, but as soon as somebody else came along, that the story would change, and it did. However, that said, when you get a little bit older, a lot of the high schools in Ontario have a world's religion course in, I think it's grade 10 or 11 or something is what it's intended to, although I assume any high school can take it. Bring it on. Anytime you want to come up, especially if you include secular humanism, anytime you want to come up and say, hey, here's your religion, but here's all these other ones that are currently available, and maybe some of the myths that, Hercules used to be a demigod, hugely thought of in the culture that he came from. Now he's a Disney movie. But that's a legitimate religion at one time. Bring all that stuff on. Let's put all that stuff on the table. Thor was somebody important before he became associated with Marvel, and that's where these gods end up, right? I mean, as soon as the last guy that believes in him dies, now they're myth. They're not religions anymore. It's just myth, and we make Disney movies about them. But up until then, we have to very serious. I mean, it's nonsense in my view. But bring all that stuff, put it all on the table. Put on the fact that huge parts of our culture, a huge part of Ontario for sure, and Canada, plus most of Europe, really don't follow any of this stuff anymore. We've kind of left that behind us. It's back in antiquity. It's third world countries and stuff where we have strong religious beliefs because people are very poor and they're looking for something to hang on to. So, there's a whole lot of psychology as to why we have religions, but not a whole lot of theology supporting it because, when you have 50 different gods that are all coming from based on where you're born, not, some divine thing, then it kind of becomes obvious that, this is a cultural, not a supernatural thing going on.
So then to kind of expand on my question, would your preferred outcome to your case had been them saying, all right, if you're not going to distribute all materials equally, then no materials will be distributed at this age because it's not appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no indoctrinational material should be distributed for any reason anywhere in the school system. I mean, it just doesn't make in a public system, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to have information about religions, there's no problem. Hey, information, I'm all for that, right? But indoctrinational stuff, where we're bringing in, there's no course that we're taking where we're comparing Islam to Hinduism or something. We're not doing that. We're just going to say, here's a bunch of religious stuff. That stuff I don't think belongs in schools at all. Certainly doesn't belong in schools with younger kids that are maybe influenced by this. You get teachers and stuff standing up. Kids love their teachers, and it's like a extended parent. So you get a teacher standing up, and she has to have these weird ideas that parents don't agree with. I mean, that's traumatic for a kid. So so our thing has always been teach kids as much as you can, but don't indoctrinate them in public schools and stay away from other people's kids. For crying out loud. Even if the kid's being taught wrong, it's probably better that he not have people openly challenging his parents' authorities or whatever, in his mind when he's that young. I mean, they need to have that stability of knowing that they can trust their parents and all that sort of stuff. And let's face it, half the time parents are wrong, but, hey, we will be too. Wait until you have kids and they tell you.
No, I honestly really empathize or sympathize with your situation because I have 3 children myself. So when I picked out your story the other day that we were recording an episode and we talked about it briefly, I was curious to actually ask you whether or not you felt the results of your case kind of backfired, because I was curious if your true intent was to kind of remove this age-inappropriate indoctrination material from the schools, but then you're coming at it from the angle of we're being discriminated against, so either treat everyone equally by not having this material or treat everyone equally by having the material. How do you feel about the results of the ruling?
Well, the ruling was bang on. And you're right. There's a little issue there because we would prefer not to have indoctrination material at all, but the ruling is open to treating everyone equally. I was advised about a week ago that the school board has in fact banned everything.
Oh,
okay, so
excellent.
they did exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so they basically said since we don't support the other alternative material, we're just going to go with no material.
Yeah, and since I launched the case, there's been about 4 other boards. Waterloo being the most notable because they had a big issue happen in the media there. But there's Clearwater had one. There's a couple of others. Every single board has come to the same conclusion. They've all said we're not going to have it at all, and there's a reason for that. Because although the court ruling or the hearing ruling did leave open the possibility that as long as you're treating everyone equally, you're allowed to treat everyone equally. That's the kind of the way the legislation is. So if they're treating all religious points of view equally, then they can actually distribute everything. But the downside is, look at some of the nonsense. And what do you define as a religion in the first place? Right? So really, you're going to send little Junior home with something,
Your thetan levels are too high, Junior. Please join Scientology. Xenu
yeah,
needs
absolutely. I mean, there's stuff there that you just sit back and, smoke pot in Jamaica and, hey, it's part of the religion, I mean, there's stuff out there. And to be fair to the restitutions there, or whatever you pronounce that, I mean, I think they actually have a sincere thing, and there's actually some reality to that. It wasn't just an excuse to smoke pot, but, that ain't our culture, and that's not what most parents in our culture would want their kids bringing home from school. So we have enough kids bringing that home from school already.
I guess it depends if it's printed on paper that you can then break down and roll up into something you can use for recreation.
Well, there you go. But, so what is it you're going to allow to kids to send home? And at what point, as soon as you say, wait a minute, that nonsense cult that had some really bad stuff going on and all this sort of stuff, he's trying to distribute stuff, that's outside of the realm, but you're back in court, because by their perspective, and a lot of, the neat thing about nut cases is that usually they actually are legitimately nut cases. They really believe it, so they're sincere. And, they have sincere beliefs. So if you're going to come in and say, we're going to let people with sincere beliefs distribute stuff, you're looking at everything. And so, of course, there's only one solution to that, and that is that schools should be teaching kids about math and literature and all that stuff. And if people want to do some religious stuff, they can do that with their families. And there's lots of community organizations. I see churches on every corner almost. So there's lots of places for them to go.
Okay.
They don't need that in school.
Well, then, my final question, and I'm sorry, Dragonbeard, I'm just kind of curious. In my own personal experience, I've had a bit of an ongoing knee-jerk reaction to something a school in my local area is doing. It's actually a school my kids go to. And basically what's happened is that the first few years my children were at school, they got sent home with invitations to a Bible club that was held at that school by a local Baptist church. And I went and spoke to the principal of the school, and they said that this Baptist church, generally the people who attend are already members of that church, but that they've been allowed to send these pamphlets home with other children to try and get them to join and sit in with their friends, and that the church rents the space after hours, and that makes it okay. And my counter-argument to this so far with the school has been, you are allowing a religious organization, whether they rent the space or not, to come in and espouse a particular worldview to a group of school children in a school setting, which gives that particular group the appearance of school authority. And it's in the place where they go to learn things that are factual, and then they're being taught this. And I said, what if I want to come in and teach a critical thinking and reasoning club? Are you going to allow that? And they're like, oh, what are your qualifications? Well, what's the qualifications of the lady who comes from the church? So I'm curious.
What qualifications can you have to teach a myth?
Yeah, exactly.
Belief that God spoke to her at night.
Yeah. So, like, my curiosity is that, like, me personally, I don't have any experience dealing with these kind of cases or tribunals. So if I were to want to take this further, do you think I, A, have a case, and B, like, what step would I actually take? Or is it just basically following the steps you mentioned before?
Yeah. First, let's have a conversation, offline and on the side, because I'll hold, fill the form out for you.
Okay.
Okay. I think you might have a little bit of a case there. That's an interesting twist. The fact that the kids are used to the school setting and that's significant to them. I've never thought of that before, but it's a very good issue. However, generally speaking, I would say, and being a taxpayer, as I'm sure we both are, school boards are strapped for money, and renting space is a revenue generation thing that they can do. They don't use the school on weekends or after hours or whatever, and there's nothing wrong with them renting it as long as they're doing that in a completely fair way. So the fact that the church group is renting the space, although I question why a church group that has a church would be renting space from a school other than to give that impression, I don't see an issue that you can say they're not allowed to do that. The point where it becomes interesting is, and I would encourage you to write a letter, it shouldn't be too hard to put together a critical thinking thing. Incidentally, if you do and they accept, you might get a lot of kids because people way overestimate the Christian population, or way underestimate the interest in non-belief. But I would formally request to get basically the same deal that the church got, and do a critical thinking, and I would be explicit about it being secular humanists lean towards it. And the reason I would be explicit about that is because I suspect that your school board will say, well, there's no way we're having atheists in here. And that's exactly, that shows the discrimination. As soon as they go, oh, this is an atheist group, well, we're not allowing that, then they're discriminating. Okay, if they're turning around and saying, we're just renting space, we don't care who it is, then they don't care. That's fine. But as soon as, if you make it explicit that you intend to teach critical thinking in relation to religious doctrines, and that you're coming at it from a secular humanist position, then if they then turn around and say, oh no, we don't think you're qualified or whatever, there's no qualifications. Churches don't have qualifications either. I mean, they have some Bible thing that they go to and they all go, oh yeah, praise the Lord, and then they say, this guy said it really well, we're going to make him the minister. There's nothing, I mean, there's stuff you can study, literature and stuff around church groups, but there's nothing, there's no qualifications for being able to speak for God. Okay, if there were one, there still wouldn't be any qualifications. You just have to take it on trust that the guy's being motivated properly. So, come on. I mean, if you have an education or something, or you study philosophy, I mean, that's always better. If you intend to bring in speakers that studied philosophy or something, well, then you bystep the whole thing because your own personal qualifications don't matter. But certainly, if they reject your offer to come and do something equivalent to what the church group is doing, but specifically for non-belief, and the church group is a religious group, and they're saying, well, we're going to let the church in, but not you, then they're absolutely discriminating. I would I would just follow the exact case that I did.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, because this is clearly, let's get this stuff away from our kids.
And I agree wholeheartedly.
This is for young grades.
Yeah, like, I mean, this is anywhere from like, this school goes all the way to grade 8, and the membership is from grade 8 all the way down to as low as grade 1, from what I understand. So I mean, we're talking kids.
I'm sure they'll take the junior kindergarten kids too.
Oh, probably. I'm sure they would. And I mean, like, I've seen the club. I believe that the membership was about 30 kids, at least 2 years ago, the last time I really raised my voice about it. Because, I was really, really not happy about it. But the one day I'm standing out in the hallway picking up my children, and the woman who comes in and teaches it starts, talking to me, and I'm like, oh, what are you teaching them today? And she goes, oh, we're teaching them about Jeremiah, I believe it was.
Okay.
And I'm like, and if memory serves, isn't that the story in the Bible about the genocide of a city?
Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
You might be thinking of Jericho.
Jericho. Jericho. Yeah.
You got to be really old to get the bullfrog.
No, Jeremiah was a bullfrog.
Yeah, I remember that song.
Jeremiah, you know what? I forget offhand. Jeremiah.
Jericho.
So it was about Jericho, the city? Oh, yeah, that's an interesting piece.
And I'm like, you're teaching kids about the story of Jericho?
They usually leave out the details about killing the babies and stuff.
Yeah, I know. But like, nice, I mean, I just stood there horrified. Like, I mean, you have to do some serious mental gymnastics to be able to teach a room full of school-age children about Jericho in any positive way.
Yeah, this is genocide. I mean, the Old Testament stories were stories of genocide. They were wiping out the people that were in the land and coming in and taking it over. I mean, it's exactly, it's exactly what we're accused to do with the natives. Although we put up reservations and stuff, which were terrible, and we did terrible things and all that sort of stuff. But at least we didn't try to. Well, we did. We starved them all by shooting all the buffaloes. Us and the U.S. But I mean, we didn't completely commit genocide. They're still around, but that's a story of complete genocide. It's murder every man, woman, child. In a couple of cases, they got lucky and they allowed them to keep the young girls who had not been touched yet and stuff like that. I mean, the only, child molesting is the only was the high spot of it. I mean, they're horrific stories, and to find a moral story in the Bible is a true challenge. New Testament's less harsh than the Old, but it's not that much better.
Not really. It's the first point in theology of Christianity, anyway, where you see the concept of infinite punishment for finite crime really take hold.
Oh, absolutely. And never mind just your own punishment. We're going to punish you. We're going to punish your children. We're going to punish your grandchildren. It's like, holy geez, really? Your slaves get punished too?
When it comes to looking at the Bible, when you start understanding it as a mythology, and you're not reading these as historical events, it's a lot easier to find it palatable, like you say, in a course that would be religious comparative studies or cultural studies, because you're not, like I said, it's not a historical event. So the genocide plays a dramatic role in a fiction story. But yeah, teaching kids this stuff like history, wow. I was taught this stuff myself. I was just telling my dad the other day that the bedtime stories he would read to us, they had these really nice drawings, like nice artwork in them.
Oh,
yeah, they were Bible stories. But the one I remember out of all the pictures is the picture of David holding Goliath's head with black blood running out of the top of the head.
Oh yeah, lovely shot. That was.
It was a bedtime story, you see.
Hey, listen, to give the biblical authors a little bit of slack here, Disney stories aren't that much better. I mean, find me a Disney story where the kids' parents don't get slaughtered.
It's true.
I mean, Bambi, if you ever, the mother gets shot.
Oh yeah.
The uncle murders the father in Lion King. I mean, for crying out loud, even over generations. I don't know what it is we do to our kids, but I really sit back and look at some of the stuff that goes through.
Hey, on a positive note, I can think of one. In The Little Mermaid, the father survives. The mother was absent the whole movie, so she probably ran off with a younger, better-looking fish. But either way, at least one of the parents was still there at the end.
Well, there you go. Yeah, and nothing particularly bad. It ends up okay for him anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually that's a great note. Yeah, some fish story. Hey, but it's a great place to visit if you ever,
Yeah, no doubt.
Bring the little kids, man. They're a lot of fun there.
Harry Potter too. That's like a very recent one where it starts out very light, but it gets dark by the end. And yeah, I know a lot of kids that they'll go right to the end. And they seem to be, they're captivated by it, but they don't seem scarred.
Yeah, it's funny about kids. They get exposed to really, really bizarre stuff. I mean, the Mother Goose stuff, Brothers Grimm, apparently, and I'm not an expert on this, but apparently they're all stuff that was taken from the old religious, pagan stuff from Europe that was being lost because of Christianity was taking it over. And they weren't trying to preserve the religion. They just wanted to kind of keep the culture stuff a little bit, so they converted them to kids' stories. But I mean, those are all horrific to children. The witch shoves them in an oven and cooks them alive and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And kids have grown up with this stuff, and I think it explains why the world's such a mess. Holy geez, really? But kids seem resilient to stuff. I don't know. It's weird. That's probably something in, evolution or whatever.
I was going to ask, you said the one book that you used was by Dan Barker, right?
Yeah, Just Pretend, and basically, somebody had given it to us. Our kids went to Camp Quest in Ontario, and I think they picked it up there, so we had a copy of it. And the particular daughter that whose class it was that we decided to challenge really kind of liked the book, although in retrospect, I'd rather have gone with Dawkins' new book, except that it hadn't been published yet, because this one was a little hard on Santa Claus. So, hey, a lot of parents still teach their kids, the whole Santa Claus thing too, and think it's funny or whatever. And we didn't actually, by the way. I just kind of thought it was better to be truthful, so we told them that the baby story and the Santa Claus story were both stories.
Yeah.
But, and they were okay with that, right? And we told them, by the way, don't tell anybody else, because some people play a little game there, and they were fine. But, some people do that, and, don't have strong feelings one way or the other about how you deal with Santa Claus with your kids, so it doesn't matter to me. But that was the only downside. I thought all the religious stuff was bang on, but, Santa Claus, kind of harsh.
Hello, non-believers and seculars. We'll be talking more about religion and politics on today's Free Thought Radio. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylord.
And I'm Dan Barker, your friendly neighborhood atheist of the airwaves.
Free Thought Radio is the weekly production of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
In Canada, the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal has agreed to hear a complaint by a Niagara region parent who's objecting to Gideon Bibles in his daughter's school. Welcome to Free Thought Radio, Rene.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Okay.
And I guess I met you briefly a couple years ago at the World Religions Conference. Was that where it was?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
Yeah, that was pretty... They invited an atheist to a World Religions Conference, and so you and a bunch of secular humanists showed up, and we took our place at the table.
And this is actually where there's a tie-in with Barker there, because we had to find something to distribute in order to challenge to see if they were doing this fairly. So we offered to distribute to our own child's class one time, 1 year, just pretend.
So you were doing that to make a point. You didn't really want to distribute secular humanist atheist material to the children, right?
No, I don't want to do that because, frankly, I don't think it's appropriate to be going after other people's kids.
Well, I would have donated books, if you'd asked. I would have donated maybe...
We can't donate enough for the whole province of Ontario.
What's the name of that book? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, it was Just Pretend.
Just Pretend.
Yeah,
that's right.
And then it had a subtitle, was something as a primer or something for kids or something. But yeah, it's a really, it really is age appropriate. It's all cartoons and, might even have that picture of Jason in it, actually, now that I think about it, with, or David rather, with Goliath head, because they did talk about some of the, stories, books that you get from other stuff, but they talked about, all sorts of gods, so.
I have another question for you, actually, about this tribunal.
Sure.
When a ruling is made by the tribunal, is it applied only regionally, or does it become something that becomes a precedent that is applied or supposed to be applied province-wide, but you have to go, like, for instance, if in Waterloo a similar case came up as yours, would they just go and check and see, oh, yes, this case proves that this is wrong, therefore you have to change in accordance with this ruling, or do they have to go and seek out the details of your case and then present that as a grounds to have that region's rules changed?
Yeah, very good question. There's a couple components there. Let me start off with what it applies to. The particular case, the ruling that we got, we were challenging our local board, so the ruling was against our local board. So the adjudicator, which is effectively the judge, made an order that our board would behave in a certain way, either get rid of the policy or open it up. So the ruling itself or the judgment itself was a directive to the board to act in a particular way. However, Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario obviously is Ontario-wide. So the tribunal system is a Ontario, it's considered quasi-constitutional. The nation has a constitution. The province has a document which is treated like a provincial version of the constitution, and that's what the Human Rights Code is. So that basically applies across. But anytime you want to challenge something, it can be as blatant as you want, but you have to make the argument that the other person is violating something. So they really are kind of case by case. What you do is you have a lawyer send, or you can even do it and send a letter to whoever's doing something wrong, and you say, buddy, here's the case that says that what you're doing is wrong, and if you don't stop, we're going to pursue this and take you to a tribunal or to court or whatever you want to do with it. But if it's a criminal thing, then the police step in and they just automatically stop it. But for the civil stuff like this, they may argue, oh, no, this particular situation doesn't apply, and then you end up doing a challenge by challenge. So, in fact, even though this ruling has come down, I may have to go school board to school board to get them all to stop doing it. Or go after the Minister of Education and say, you put out a ruling making them all stop doing it because it's obvious that it's wrong.
Yeah. So it seems like about 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
A little bit. The other point to make, though, is although this is the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, as it turns out, tribunals and the legal system will look for precedents in other jurisdictions. So even though this was resolved in Ontario, somebody in BC can quote this case in a challenge over there, and that would I mean, you know, it's
So it could stretch beyond this province specifically and get into other provinces.
Absolutely. It
That's
can have
cool.
a national thing. And this particular case is a precedent because people had challenged people on the basis of creed before. Well, I'm Muslim and he's Catholic and he's making me do something Catholic and I want to be Muslim. But there never really hashed out whether or not non-belief qualified. And so this case really did establish that, yes, if your view is non-belief, you're a secular humanist or an atheist or whatever term you want to use, you have every right that any religious person would have. It applies equally to you as it does to anyone else. If someone's doing something, they want to push something in the school or at the town hall or whatever, you can step in and say, well, unless you're doing my view too, and that counts, even though my view is that there isn't a God, so how's that a creed? It's a perspective on religion. So creed can be the belief in a religion or can be a perspective, you know, your view on religion. So we count. So that's an important thing. So it is a precedent, this particular case, and it does apply nationally, although much stronger in Ontario than in other provinces.
Well, I guess
was there another part of that?
No, that pretty much will cover everything I asked.
I guess that kind of makes sense, right? Because it has to do with, I guess these issues will go back to the Charter of Rights that we have.
Yes, absolutely. And the Canadian Civil Liberties Association sat in and intervened, I think was the term, made presentations on this case as well. And that their intent on doing that was to bring in the charter, because I didn't do anything with the charter because it's federal and this is obviously a provincial tribunal. And then when I looked at it, I realized, well, the Ontario Code was more than enough to solve the issue anyway, so I didn't need to make a charter argument. But they felt compelled to come in, and they actually sent 2 lawyers. As I say, I ended up in this room with 6, a judge and 6 constitutional lawyers, in which I was making the lead presentation.
So this is what you mean by having good self-esteem, right?
Yeah. That 4 of the 6 were on my side. They weren't on my side. They weren't helping me at all, but they were the perspectives that basically supported our views. But their point was that the charter should be looked at as well in the case because the charter clearly, says the same thing. You can't do this sort of stuff. So it could have been a charter challenge. Getting the prayer, Lord's Prayer, out of the school system was done through the Canadian Charter of Rights rather than the Ontario Code. So that was automatic.
I still remember making it.
What's that?
I still remember making it when I was in school.
The prayers?
Oh yeah. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses.
Yeah.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. The side note of that, and something I'm looking at as part of a secondary case here, is 2 out of 3 of my kids learned that prayer in school without our knowledge.
Wow, really?
Yeah. They did it on the basis of they have there's a thing in grade 3, so even much younger, about Pioneer Day stuff.
Yeah.
So they do a little field trip to our local Pioneer Museum. And then the excuse was to make it so they'd experience a day that the pioneers had.
Right.
Pioneers said the Lord's Prayer at the beginning of school, so they have to all learn it. And I remember when I complained about it, I should have taken them to court then. My big regret was to be way too tolerant on these issues. I learned over time that if you allow a little bit, they take more. But I remember talking to teachers, what the hell? Are you stupid? You're teaching the Lord's Prayer to people's kids who don't want them to know it. And,
yeah.
Why would you even do this? And he said, well, the only reason we teach it is because so many of the kids don't already know it.
Oh, well, yeah.
Buddy, did you not get something from that? It's the dominant thing in the Christian religion. If the kids don't know the number one main thing that you're supposed to learn, do you think maybe there's a reason? Do you think really it's up to you to teach it?
One of us, Google gobble.
But this is what I said earlier. If you offer a course, you might get a lot of takers. I think there would be a lot more people in my kids' schools that would have, several of them are openly non-believing, They're not public about it as I am, but they're fairly open about it. And I think you'd have a lot more people sending kids into a non-belief critical thinking course than you ever would to a vacation Bible school thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of other history that they don't teach when you go to Pioneer. Like, how about when they get smacked with a ruler?
Well, you know what? And that was one of our points, because they actually did do something along that lines, except they didn't smack them. They made them, I think they made them sit with their nose touching the chalkboard or something for 5 minutes or something. It was a punishment you got. But they did that to simulate what would have happened, which was you would have been taken out in the woodshed and given a good beating. And I went to the school and they said, oh, well, we have to, did the Lord's Prayer, we have to do it. I said, no, you can just do like a rhyme, anything to simulate that. You don't have to actually do it. You don't beat the kids, even though they did it in Pioneer days. You don't need to be doing religious stuff, even though they did it in Pioneer days. So, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like that. You just make accommodations. But the neat thing about it, too, is, a big part of the Pioneer days was the natives that were all around, and they had a religion, too. And, no mention of that whatsoever, no discussion of that. And, in fact, this is a Mennonite area.
That's my background, Mennonite.
Oh, there you go. Welcome to, I'm not going to say the club because it's not mine, but like everybody else here in town is. But, the fact of the matter is the first pioneers were French Canadians. They're Catholic.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So, they didn't do anything Catholic either, so it's kind of we have to have this. It's the Pioneer days, but we're actually going to ignore 90% of the religious stuff that was going around in the Pioneer times. We're only going to talk about the one that we want to promote. It's pretty openly, biased and stuff. So, this sort of stuff, and, you're bringing stuff, we're not hurting anything. Okay, well, how about we do the other then? Let's promote the other religion as well. Oh, you can't do that. And that's the bias, right? That's where you see, the wolf in the sheep's clothing. But we're not doing anything wrong until we're going to be fair with somebody else, and then it's now we have that whole different perspective.
We were wondering if, when you were going through all of this, what level of hostility, what kind of hostility from people in the community did you receive?
Oh, yeah, good point. There was some. I remember a humorous comment from the hearing from the lawyer from the Civil Liberties Association on that point, that I had taken abuse and stuff through the community on it, because there's letters in the local paper type of a thing, and the school board had gone out of its way to collect all these letters and submit them as evidence. I didn't bother. Who cares? It's people's opinion. But they had done this, so the Civil Liberties lawyers said, well, obviously Mr. Chouinard suffered a lot of abuse, and the lawyer for the school board kind of said, well, it really wasn't that bad. And the guy started laughing. Have you read some of these? It's humorous. I'll tell you right up. I've been public about non-belief basically since I moved to Grimsby. So, for years before this case. So people who wanted to confront me could have in advance. This was just sort of, something else I did. So there may have been a sense of they didn't bother too much anymore. I don't know. But the other side is, because I had written stuff before and other people had attacked me, other people from the community had gotten in the habit of writing in to defend me. I can honestly say that of what got printed, at least 50%, at least, was supportive. And I would say it's probably more like 65 or 70%. I had, I think, one guy call me who was, not had a handful of people. People don't, and don't call people, by the way, if you see something in the paper. Write them a letter, that's fine. Nobody's ever threatened by a letter, but taking calls in your home type of a thing can be a little bit disruptive and make, take you a little off at ease, because you never know who's on the other end. But a handful of people called me to basically heartfelt thanks, for having stood up for it. Numerous letters in the paper, like I say, more than half support this particular thing. I had people contact me, one lady from Mexico who heard about it.
Oh, wow.
The guy who actually went to school here and went to the local high school. He's a doctor, a PhD of some sort. Can't remember what. I think one of the sciences out in Washington State now, but wrote and thanked me because of the negative experiences he had through the school system here, and was really appreciative that someone stood up. So I don't have trouble sleeping at night. There's some people that really dislike me, and a whole lot of people that are really appreciative and have expressed it. So
that's good to
at the
hear.
end of the day, I encourage people. Yeah, you got to have a little bit of thick skin. You are going to get some nut cases, shooting their mouth off at you. But I actually got confronted. There's a humanist group here in St. Catharines that I spoke to a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of a debate type format. And so they had some religious people, and this one nut came up, you should be ashamed of yourself. And about 3 or 4 people took him aside and explained to him that they didn't appreciate his attitude, and then came to me and said, no, don't be ashamed. You look at stuff like that, you got to look at the source, right? You look at the people that are saying it, and you realize, like, honestly, those are the people I'm trying to help, because somebody brainwashed them when they were in grade 5, and I feel really bad. Like that screwed up their life. You look at some of those people, they were, their lives revolve around a myth. It's really sad. And I'd like to stop some of the kids, the next generation from suffering from that, because, they end up there, statistically, lower income people, lower education, they're not doing all that well. And they've been really, really influenced by some of this stuff. I mean, it's a social harm as far as I'm concerned. So, part of the reason of speaking out and doing your show and me doing the stuff that I do is, to try to kind of turn that tide a little bit and then maybe stop some of that. I think it's abusive, it's harmful, it hurts kids, it hurts them when they grow up.
Every little bit helps.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you just got to be out there. You just got to make a little bit of noise and let people know that non-belief is okay. And Penn Gillette made an interesting comment on that. He may have been copying it from somebody else, I'm not sure. If you break religion, it will never come back. Something else will come back. A different religion will come back, but that what's being, that particular religion will never come back.
Yep.
If you destroyed science, and it has happened in the Dark Ages and stuff, it will come back. People will figure it out again because it's true. So there's some place to go. The thing with this stuff, if we can stop indoctrination, we really are doing something. It only exists by indoctrinating children. If you weren't indoctrinated as a child, you're not going to start jumping. I mean, a few people do, I guess, but almost no one jumps on these bandwagons. It's just because you were conditioned as a child to think that it's okay, and it's not okay. I mean, it's harmful. And you see people that can ill afford it, giving huge amounts of money to some guy who's having parties and tapping his foot in bathrooms and stuff.
Well, for me, I was raised with the indoctrination, but I guess my church was not aware of the danger of letting children watch Star Trek growing up.
Well, Gene Roddenberry's a huge, been a huge influence, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he did exactly what we're talking about. I mean, he brought comparative religions into the main culture. We're talking about maybe letting that into schools. He did that on Saturday afternoon TV. They did stuff on some of the Greek mythologies, but they also did a whole bunch of stuff on that effectively, just below the surface were theological arguments, and that all sorts of different people had different ideas. He made that really apparent. So.
Oh, yeah? Well, me and the Lord, we got an understanding. We're on a mission from God.
Do atheists deserve religious protection? In a landmark ruling, the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal says yes. The ruling came after a battle between an Ontario father, Rene Chouinard, and the District School Board of Niagara. The tribunal weighed Rene's right to distribute an atheist book at school against the Gideon's right to hand out Bibles. The ruling declares atheism a creed that deserves the same religious protections as any other recognized faith. We're joined by Rene Chouinard in Toronto. He's the winner of the Human Rights Tribunal case that declared atheism a creed. Rene, why does atheism deserve the same protection as religion?
Well, population in Ontario and in Canada, non-belief has been hugely growing. It's a huge part of our population. We certainly can't have any portion of our population that has less rights or different rights than any other group. I mean, it's just a fundamental basic principle of human rights that everyone be treated equally.
But what are the rights of atheists specifically that need to be protected? I can see how various religious rights might need protection, but what are the things that atheists do that need special protection?
Well, the issue with the atheists is that we have the same right. If you're going to be making public presentations, what have you, then non-belief has the same right to be presented in that. And social presentation that everybody has a religious belief is false.
First you trade the Cadillac for a microphone. Then you lie to me about the band. Now you're gonna put me right back in the joint.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
Yeah, true, but he also brought in, on the negative side, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, he brought in, kind of this allowability for people like Eric Von Donigan and the Ancient Aliens crew on the History Channel. Oh, that drives me nuts that Ancient Aliens is on the History Channel. But, a lot of people who kind of didn't go and understand the message was kind of supposed to be a contemporary view of the world at the time, kind of take it as, oh, well, that means aliens are real and that our DNA has been altered by beings from another planet and UFOs are really Klingons. Any particular show like that can kind of be taken wrong by the right people, I guess.
You make a just and valid point. I'm not sure we can hang that all on Rottenberry.
No, not on Rottenberry.
But you know what? You're absolutely. And I think what that speaks to a little bit is, that religious type ideas do form. I mean, it has something to do with our psyche, and we have to be on guard against them, and we're vulnerable to them just like everybody else. And yeah, you're absolutely right. People replaced the traditional religions with Bigfoot or alien abduction or mediums, all sorts of stuff. When you see through one, there's a tendency for people to shift to something else. And I think to be brought up in a critical thinking environment helps you a lot to not get sucked into something like that.
I agree.
That's part of the issue with Santa Claus, to be honest. We talked about him a little bit earlier, but when you're teaching kids that there's a tooth fairy or that any kind of sort of thing, they're cute stories and everybody enjoys them, but you're setting them up with an idea. You're setting them up with an idea that this sort of realm is reasonable. And you're doing it at an age where even later on when you go, hey, by the way, that's not really true, it still affects them. And there's some interesting psychology stuff on that. There's an age period, it's referred to as preschool, but I think it carries up into grade 1, where kids actually, when they learn stuff, they learn it uncritically and they incorporate it in a very, very strong way. And it's very difficult for them to get over that after. So yeah, your point's very well made that if we got rid of all the religions, there would be new ones that would come up and it would be space aliens or whatever. It'd be something different, but it would be something. But also that doing stuff with kids is something we really have to be, I think there's a lot more research coming on that front and we have to be a little careful there.
You're right. Things do get into a child's psyche pretty hard. Every once in a while, I still hold aloft my magic sword and say, by the power of Grayskull. No, but it's true. Kids are so impressionable. Like, I can't tell you how many injuries I received as a child, like grabbing a skipping rope and trying to swing like Indiana Jones from my parents' banister in Montreal. I think I broke like 3 tables trying to do that.
As long as it was only tables.
Yeah, only tables.
Yeah, and even growing up, the tactics that we were talking about with, they try and play it off as history or heritage. Even when I was younger and I was a ardent evangelical Christian, I really didn't understand, that type of behavior. I used to have, I was a Christian into my early 20s and then kind of coasted as a Christian for another number of years. And I remember many times having arguments with people in my church or other believers I knew in my family about that type of tactic. Like, if you're dishonest with people, they're going to know. And they seem to think that people would just be tricked by the tactic and then become a believer and let it all go, and it would all be happy.
Well, that's a funny point, because that is one of the strategies of the Christian apostolate. There, say anything. It doesn't make any difference whether it's true or not.
Yeah.
And because when you convert them, you're doing the right thing.
Well, that's
anything
where
you do. Anything you do that ends up with them believing, and then later on you can go, well, that wasn't really true, but now that you're a believer, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, that's one of the main theories that critical scholars have about where the Bible stories come from and why we have the variations in it, is because these were stories that were being told to convert people, and then when they got written down, there was different traditions, and they had to try and amalgamate them.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. Big part of that has to do with the Old Testament. There used to be two. There was Israel and Jordan, I guess, which were the north and the south groups, and then when they united, they had the same stories, but they drifted. So that's why you tend to get duplicate versions of things in the Old Testament. You get two stories of Noah and the Ark. You get two stories of creation, and they're not the same. And they just kind of follow one after the other. It tells the story, and then it tells it again differently. And that's probably where some of that comes from. Yeah.
Well, Rene, this is Smashlock. I guess we haven't really been identifying who's speaking and when. Anyways, it's been an absolute
I haven't had a clue.
Yeah, okay. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. I'm going to let Dragonbeard finish it off because I unfortunately stole my wife's van keys and have to go pick her up. So, such is life. Thank you for answering all of my questions. I had a wonderful time. So I'll leave it to Dragonbeard and you to finish this interview off.
Okay, well, it's been great talking to you.
All right, keep up the fight, man.
All right, now you only have one troublemaker to deal with.
I don't know that you beat me out on the troublemaker crown there, buddy. I've caused a bit of trouble myself.
Well, if you're going to do any good in this world, some people are going to call you a troublemaker.
Well, there you go. You do have to. I mean, you go along with what everybody else is doing, or you change things. And if you change things, then you feel upset that you did. So. Yep. Yeah. But that's what we need. I mean, unless you think it's an ideal world the way it is, then you need to change things. So, if you don't have somebody mad at you by breakfast, you're not doing something right.
Yeah. The way I think of it is that we don't all have to. We can't all be the person that's making the case or making the speech or whatever the case may be, but we should all take enough time to consider the issues and from time to time show our support for someone who's trying to make things better.
Both of those points are huge. One is we do have to stop and think about things and not just accept just because it's the way it's always been. And that's huge, just to stop and think. But the other side of the coin is to occasionally come up and say, hey, you know what, maybe I don't have to make the speech, but I'm going to let people know that I agree with it. There's a huge non-belief community. In Ontario, if you look at the last stats, 24%, just under 23.9, if anybody wants to call me on it, are don't belong to a religion. Now, a lot of them may believe that there might be something, but they don't belong to religion. They reject religion, and to the point where they do that on surveys. So there's a lot of research that's been done that's concluded that people lie about how religious they are in surveys. People say they're more religious than they really are. It's some cultural thing. We're not really sure why, but at this point we have 24% of the population in Canada saying that they're non-religious. 40% are Catholics. So if you talk to Catholics, like 95% of Quebec is Catholic, and 98% of Quebec doesn't go to church or have anything to do with it. I mean, they're Catholics because that's what their heritage is. That brings you down to there's a fringe group or a bunch of fringe groups around that have small numbers, and then you get to the Protestants. If you add up all the different Protestant numbers, you get something like 28%. There's like a 4-point spread. We are that strong in Canada. And yet, if you go around, everybody agrees with us, but they say, well, don't tell anyone, though. I don't want to get in trouble at work. What do you mean you don't want to get in trouble at work? Unless you're in the Catholic, if you're in the Catholic community and whatever. But, Catholics, let's face it, I come from a Catholic background, so does my wife, and, everybody's Catholic. But then, oh, yeah, the Pope said that. Oh, well, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And the Protestant thing, it's the same thing. The vast majority of the people, I met a guy who was the governor of one of the churches here in town. He was like one of the guys on the board that runs the church, but he had a dispute with the new minister. And I said, well, what was this dispute about? The dispute was the new minister thought you should believe in God to be on the board, so he had to leave. What? I'm serious.
Oh, wow.
In some of those churches, I kind of regretted not going to some because my kids were into music and they have good music programs. They have, lots of social stuff. There's some good stuff going on there. But, so I see why people would go. But yeah, they're not. You know, this idea that there's this huge Christian majority even in these rural areas, or religious majority in more diverse areas, it's nonsense. There's a huge non-religious majority in Canada, and most people that even say, "Oh well, I kind of believe it," don't do anything about it, don't care about it, wouldn't raise a finger to defend it. You know, we should speak out. That's all. We just let people know. There's a huge pendulum, and it's about to swing the other way. We just have to have people, you know, admit. Yeah, I remember once talking, this is a true story. I'm standing at the school waiting to pick up the kids in kindergarten. I was a stay-at-home parent, and there was 3 other fathers, and I'm kind of eavesdropping a little bit, and they're talking about something about, you know, this Sunday stuff, and, you know, and they're kind of bashfully saying, well, you know, we don't go very often and stuff, trying to hold up appearances amongst themselves. All 3 of them had individually seen something I'd written in the paper previously and come and said, don't tell anybody, but really, you know, you're right on. I think that the religious stuff's all a bunch of crap, and I just don't want people to... 3 guys standing around trying to pretend that they're religious so that they impress the other 2 guys. All 3 of them I knew not to be. You know, for crying out loud.
Peer pressure, social pressure.
Oh yeah, it's just ridiculous. And just stand up and start saying, hey, you know what, I don't believe that stuff. That's just a bunch of nonsense. You know, some old guy made that up. There's nothing to that. And frankly, once people start doing it, like, we're not a minority. It's hard to find people that really think there's fairies.
And in families, it's even tougher. I know that my family's been pretty easygoing about it. When I finally started telling them that I was an atheist, they aren't obviously overjoyed about it. The ones who are strong believers, and I've had as it's the only hostility I've gotten was it wasn't really even hostility. It was just, oh, you know that stuff's not true. That our faith is true. You know better. Now, that's not too hostile, but some families, they'll kick their kids out of the house or.
Yeah, there's a handful of really extremists, and some of the really extremist religious groups are really bad for that. The Mormons are well known for it, and Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. You get disowned. Some of these really strong Mennonite communities, you get kicked out. You're not allowed to see your near friends anymore and stuff. So it really can be a huge thing. The new thing about families that I found, and, you know, I got my side, which was evangelical. My mother is an evangelical person. And my in-law side. And in both cases, it's almost the same. It's reflected in society. I've later found out that there, you know, it wasn't any, you know, the religious support. There was 1 or 2 dominant people that were pushing it really hard, and everybody else going, "Don't say anything. We don't want to upset grandma," type of a thing. But that they kind of played along with it. But that, in fact, I've had a lot of support from both sides of you know, both the in-laws and my own family, despite the fact that there are elements in both that are very strongly religious. So, you know, it's a tough issue with family. I think you should come out and you should let them know, because you're lying and you're being dishonest to your own family.
Yeah, and that's why I did. I just wanted to be honest about it, not to tell them I was going to tell them off at the dinner table or anything. It was just like, you know, we're having these conversations and I'm clearly allowing you to hold an old view of me. So I would finally start telling people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kind of have to, and you know, and like I say, if you get enough people doing it, even in families, I think you'll find out that there's a fair amount of support for it. But I have to tell you, I sat in some cases, I mean, it was years and years and years later that people confided that, well, I actually agree with you, I just didn't want to say anything. Well, thanks. A little support then might have been useful, you know, because you really do kind of sometimes get left out thinking that you're the only person, and it's not. It isn't the case, but you're left with that impression because other people don't want to be left in a position where they're the only person. Cowards.
I don't know if it's been like this for you, but one of the most amusing things, and I've actually gotten scowls when people realize that I have my eyes open when they're praying, is that when I'm like at a family gathering or there's a bunch of people there and the kids will have their eyes open and they're looking around, they'll see that I'm the adult with my eyes open and they'll smile at me. this kind of inside joke that we've got, that we've both got our eyes open.
Yeah. You know what I think that's about? Because you'll find that everywhere. And I I don't have any studies or anything to back this up, but I'm really pretty sure what's going on there, especially, notice it's very often the young kids and kids that are just being indoctrinated, and they'll come to you and they'll say, well, Jesus is real, and they'll look at you like, are you going to crack up laughing or, because I really think that they're testing to see whether or not they're getting fed a line or whether or not you really believe in it. So, oh no, we all close our eyes and stuff, and then they kind of go, well, okay, that's what we're supposed to do, but I'm going to look because I wonder if I'm closing my eyes like I'm being told to and everybody else is pointing and laughing and thinking it's funny. I really think that even at very young ages, kids are looking at it going, really? I'm supposed to believe what?
Yeah.
Because you see that a lot with very young kids, and they're just getting old enough to be indoctrinated and be told, oh yeah, no, there's fairy people, and they're kind of going, really? And I think you get the same thing around Santa Claus in grade 1 and grade 2, where it's kind of a, really? I'm supposed to, is this really what's going on? There's somebody pulling my leg. And they kind of get that sense that, this doesn't really have passed the smell test.
Yeah.
And, they're right. So it is kind of a fun, but you're right, it happens a lot, and it's usually kids.
Yeah. And they just get this little mischievous smile. It's an inside joke that we have that even their parents don't know about. They're not going to tell them because they know the rules are supposed to be you close your eyes.
Yeah.
I think they're used to looking around and seeing other kids that aren't doing it that are also looking around because kids are always trying to learn, right?
Yep.
But when they see a grown up do it, I think it's a special treat for them.
yeah, a little bit fun. And, and as I say, you don't want to, I mean, it's better to let them get indoctrinated than to criticize their parents because they really need that anchor. And I might be wrong on that point, but I really kind of think that kids need to have, even if their parents are nuts, they need to know that, the parents are going to keep them safe and all that sort of stuff. They have to have that security. There will be a time when, when that breaks down and then it's more open. But certainly to have, a smile during prayer time type of a thing where, it kind of leaves that door open a little bit. That's not going to hurt the kid. It's probably going to give them a little bit of reassurance that there's other people around that are looking at it too and that peek. Incidentally, we were talking about Gene Roddenberry earlier. Spock does this 3-fingered thing.
Yep.
Do you know what that's from?
Yeah. Let's see. Leonard Nimoy suggested that, right? He's his Jewish background. That's something to do with the
Jewish background. Yep.
The Jewish tradition, right? Something in their tradition.
There's a point in their service where I think everybody turns and faces the back of the church or the temple or whatever the heck that is, and I think they're supposed to have their eyes closed, and the rabbi stands behind them and speaking and doing something, right? And you're not supposed to look. So as a young lad, Leonard Nimoy, and he just felt in the show that he needed to have something to make him stand out. But as a young lad, Leonard Nimoy decided, curiosity killed the cat, and I got to have a peek. And he sneaks around, he peeks around behind him, and sure enough, they do the 3-finger thing with both hands spread out wide. And it's some kind of a prayer thing.
Yeah.
But obviously, 3 is there's a couple of things to show up. Joseph Campbell speaks well of this, the late Joseph Campbell.
Yep.
He studied a lot of mythology, and the number 3 comes up a lot, and the whole Trinity type thing. And clearly this is another example of it, even though obviously Jewish, not Trinity. They don't believe in the Trinity, but there's a 3, and that crosses cultures for some reason. It's the number 3 shows up in religious ideologies all over the place, and that would be an example of it showing up there. But yeah, that's where that's from. It's Leonard Nimoy as a young lad.
It's amazing.
Breaking the rules and peeking when everybody's supposed to be praying.
So we all benefited a lot, in my opinion, from him not listening to Mommy and Daddy that day.
Because we got more finger dexterity.
That's true. It took me a while, but I did master doing it on both hands when I was younger.
Well, there you go. And thousands of listeners now are giving it a shot.
All right. I know you have some family stuff coming up, so I'll let you go. Again, thank you very much for coming on the show and talking about the experiences you went through and offering up any insight that hopefully someone will listen to this and be able to get a bit of a context where before they were just floating. I had no idea how any of it works.
Yeah, I appreciate the exposure, actually, because you're right. There's a lot of people that don't really understand the process, and a big thing I get often is, how is that a human rights thing, handing out Bibles in schools? And it's a human rights thing because you're treating one religious ideology or one person's personal beliefs differently and giving it superiority over other people's beliefs. And even if they're not attacking your beliefs, if they're promoting theirs, that's equally discriminatory. So just sort of an opportunity to give people a better understanding of that and why that's an issue and why we should be concerned about it. It's a social thing, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to voice it.
Yeah, anytime. So thanks for listening in. I hope that you picked up on a few good pointers there. All of the different audio you've heard, the media, and all the different subjects he's talked about is covered on his website, which I'll put in the show notes. And I'll let you connect through his website. That way you'll hopefully get the best of what you're looking for, and you'll decide to contact him so he can advise you or give you a little inspiration.
You're such a disappointing pair. I prayed so hard for you. It saddens and hurts me that the two young men whom I raised to believe in the 10 Commandments have returned to me as two thieves with filthy mouths and bad attitudes. Get out and don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.